true faith in you. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring your love. Where there is injury, your pardon, Lord. And where there's doubt, true faith in you. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there's despair in life, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, only light. And where there's sadness, ever joy. Oh, Master, grant that I may never seek so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love with all my soul. Make me a channel of your peace. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned, in giving of ourselves that we receive.
Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me so love. Where there is injury, let me so pardon. Where there is doubt, let there be faith. Where there's despair, let me sow hope. Where there is darkness, let there be light. Where there is sadness, joy. Oh, divine Master, grant that I may never seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. To eternal
Previously on FRIARSIDE CHATS, we learned about the radical nature of Saint Francis. His imprisonment made him rethink his life direction and brought out the radical change in him. From despising lepers, he was transformed and saw the face of God as he carried the leper in his arms. His radical nature was also revealed when he dramatically unclothed himself in front of the bishop and gave his clothes back to his father as he turned away from his life of comfort and from his family. In wanting to please God and spread the gospel through his preaching, he also made a radical move and went to Rome to get the Pope's approval when he could have just sought approval from the bishop. He chose to live a radical life of poverty in a manner which even the Pope himself doubted he could sustain. In all this radicalism, Saint Francis had to conquer his fears and face his doubts. His decision to abandon his dream of becoming a knight to heed Christ's call to build his church definitely did not happen overnight. In last week's episode, we concluded with this reflection question. What fear or doubt have you encountered or are currently encountering in your life? And how has this learning about the life of Saint Francis helped you in coping? Let's listen to the sharing of Javier Gomez for this reflection question.
What fear or doubt have you encountered or struggling with? I think in this time we live, there's a lot to be afraid of, and I can name many. There's the fear for my mental well-being, there's the fear for my health, there's the fear for my security and my safety, there's the fear for my future and how to adapt to this world that is so chaotic. And I could keep going on with this list. As I look back a little, I think the situation today has slowly lured me to a place where I feel I must rely on myself to move forward. The isolation of the pandemic tempts me to believe that I must work to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, and self-sustaining. For the sake of my safety and for the sake of my loved ones, I feel this urge to build up walls and to shut things out. And I think that's what I'm most afraid of right now. I am afraid that the situation today is slowly turning me into a person that I do not want to be. If I am not careful, this path I feel like I am on is one that seems to lead towards cynicism, isolation, and mistrust. And even though my heart doesn't want to be there, there is a voice that tells me that I must be practical, realistic. I need to look out for myself and for my inner circle. And it is here that I feel the call of Saint Francis to poverty. To me, poverty has less to do with possessions, and true poverty is about complete surrender. It is the giving up of everything. It is the surrender of my desire to control and determine my world and my life. And I imagine that Saint Francis' decision back then to be poor was his way of total surrender. More than the physical possessions, it was the surrender of the voice in himself that tries to say, Francis, you must be in control and you must take charge. And so he surrendered everything. He surrendered his desire to control his life. He surrendered his urge to determine his own future. And this is my own take on the poverty that Saint Francis lived. I look around and I see everyone is afraid, including me. Whether rich or poor or healthy or sick, we are all afraid. And I can only speak for myself, but I would like to be brave enough to choose true poverty. I would like to be brave enough to admit that I cannot control anything. And I know it's very easy to say and very hard to do, and I understand that this takes a lot of practice. So in response to the fear that leads me to shut people out, to mistrust, or to roll my eyes and complain that everything is so broken, I will try to practice being brave by reaching out, being hopeful, giving people chances. And I hope to do this in very small ways, just one day at a time.
Thank you, Javier, for sharing with us your reflection. Today, we will get to know more about one of the Franciscan charisms, justice, peace, and the integrity of creation. Before we begin, we'd like to share with you this video.
How much longer should we ignore the sufferings of the poor and the agony of the ecological matters? When will we stop drowning the voices of people who speak for Mother Earth? How long should this martyrdom and the ecocide go unnoticed? Humans are the only creatures in this world who cut trees, make paper from it, and then write, "Save trees." The earth groans from the pains of constant torture, abuse, and misuse. A tragic historical scene is repeating itself before a new audience. We are living in this planet as if we have another one to go. Christ is found in all creation, including the earth we call home. The Theology of Creation by St. Bonaventure says that God can be found in all creatures because they are created out of God's unconditional love. According to him, the creation is the open Bible, the first revelation, but few people realize that their actions and indifference towards the well-being of the earth and the people in the periphery are symbolic and synonymous with the suffering of our beloved Savior. Crucifixion was the most shameful and painful kind of death at that time. Yet, he thought we were worth it. That's why he died for us. Jesus was stripped of his clothing, the same way we are laying our Mother Earth bare, turning her glory and beauty to dunghill and ashes. The rate at which we cut down trees equals the loss of 40 football fields every minute. That's 50% of all the trees in the world gone in the last 100 years. Not to mention the release of chemical compounds that contain bromine, chlorine, and mercury from exploitive mining industries. Like the onlookers, perpetrators, and instigators who jeered, tormented, or even looked away from the suffering Christ in careless disgust, people respond to ecological genocide with at least one of these reactions. Jesus on the cross cried, "I am thirsty." It echoes desertification, ice depletion, famine, and water scarcity. What is our response when you hear the earth weep and cry, "I am thirsty"? In 2019, in Australia, the wildfire burnt over 11 million hectares, killing humans, wildlife, and destroying their habitats. The speculated causes of these wildfires are climate change, the integration of severe and extensive droughts with an alarmingly high level of heat waves. Meanwhile, at Jesus' crucifixion, there was darkness from the third hour, which symbolizes unexpected blackouts, extinctions, and deaths to the biopopulation and biodiversity. Jesus suffered under the Roman soldiers who divided his garments among themselves and cast lots for his seamless robe. Just like the scramble for Africa and Amazon, nations are breaking into the sacred space of the earth's crust, scrambling and ravaging every treasure on their path. We ceaselessly nail Mother Earth to the cross by reckless and endless engagement of mining machinery. Our spears drive into the sacred space of the planet. Water flows from our sides because we continue to alter the integrity of our body. Our industrial activities are blocking and breaking the lifeblood of the earth. Just as the entire world is believed to be responsible for Jesus' death, who stood for justice and truth, so is no one exempted from this heinous crime against Mother Earth. Likewise, every one of us must be held accountable for the crucifixion of Mother Earth. The voice of ecological martyrs are rising above the noise, and an undeniable light is shining through the hallway of ecological restoration and resuscitation. Before the earth draws a last breath and like Christ utters the words, "It is finished," we call for change. We work for resurrection. Quoting Pope Francis, I urgently appeal then for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet. We need a conversation that includes everyone, since the environmental challenge we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect all of us. We need to create a new culture, a new civilization that gives full respect to the infinite love and goodness of God in creation. Only then we will be able to sing together with St. Francis of Assisi and St. Bonaventure, "Praise be the Lord of creation, laudato si mi Signore." You, me, we, all of us are being called to this revolutionary mission today, the revolution of tenderness, the revolution of vigor, laudato si revolution. Let's love our Mother Earth. We do not inherit the planet from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Let's raise above our egos and care for our Mother Earth. She's feeling weak and she's calling for help. You are most welcome to be a part of this Laudato Si revolution. Only when the last tree has died and the last river been poisoned and the last fish has been caught, we will realize we cannot eat money. Listen to the wind. It talks. Listen to the silence. It speaks. Listen to your heart. It exactly knows that this is our planet, that this is our future. Amen.
Today's episode is entitled God in All Things, and our guest for today is Father Rayu Galoy, OFM. Let me turn you over to our two moderators, Len Hizon and Dennis Montecillo, co-heads of the Education and Formation Ministry at SSAP.
Welcome to FRIARSIDE CHATS. Today we are blessed to have with us Father Rayu Galoy, OFM, to discuss the topic of ecology and our environment. Len?
Thank you, Dennis. Father Rayu Galoy has been our parish priest here in Santuario de San Antonio since 2014. Prior to that, he was the guardian of Our Lady of the Angel Seminary in Novaliches for 3 years, and concurrently he was also the president of the school as well as the dean of the Intercongregational Theological Center, or the ICTC. That was for 8 years. Before that, he organized the mission community in Dagat-Dagatan, Navotas. And that was shortly after he arrived in 2007, after a 3-year stint in the United States pursuing his doctorate in ministry at the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, Illinois. Welcome, Father Ray.
Father Ray, one of the things that I learned in this country of ours that loves acronyms is the interchangeable use of the ecology and environment and JPIC. What does JPIC mean?
Okay, first of all, JPIC means justice, peace, and integrity of creation. Historically, it started with justice and peace. It's only later on that we have the integrity of creation attached to it. The justice and peace component basically started in 1965. It came from the Constitution, Pastoral Constitution of the Church, Gaudium Spes, which acknowledges the role of the Church, especially in relation to the poor. But again, it came back, it was highlighted in 1971 with the Synod of Bishops on Justice in the World, where in the reflection of our church leaders, action in participation for the transformation of the world and the justice and peace component becomes really a constitutive dimension of the proclamation of the good news of the gospel. So that's how it evolved. Then eventually, the IC component, the integrity component, became part of it in recognition that the pride of the earth is also the pride of the poor. So that, intimate relationship. Or maybe if you will make it more simple, whenever we have calamities, natural calamities, it is always the poor who would end up hardly hit.
Right.
So that component. And I think that's where this whole area of the justice and peace struggle.
If I'm hearing you right, Father, then they're not necessarily synonyms, but ecology of the environment is contained in the JPIC value of the Franciscan order. Is that a fair way to state it?
Yeah.
Okay. I learned something today.
Yes, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Father. So those are really defining moments in the development of those issues. So talking about defining moments, tell us a little bit about your childhood and what were some of the defining moments or the integral moments of your life that brought you to where we are today?
First of all, I would like to say I am a proud provincian. And therefore, I grew up very close to nature. I think back home, farming is really an extension of our life. So maybe this general context where I came from was essential to my consciousness. But of course, there were some developments. For instance, I actually grew up in a more center, in a township area, because I grew up with my grandmother or grandparents, being the first apo. And so that's basically it's in a business context, my exposure. But of course, growing up, maybe my parents see that the values I have is becoming contrary to, kasi siyempre, pangalan na ako.
Of course.
Very close to becoming spoiled brat. So I was taken from my grandparents, so I returned back to my parents when I think I was 6 years old. I remember the first time I washed dishes in the house, I was really crying. So my mother and father were laughing at me because I pitied myself. I never do these things with my grandma. But with my own parents, it's like a punishment. But of course, later on in my life, I'm very grateful that I was really trained to do house chores. I was sidekick of my mom, being eldest in the family. So I think the training also in my home helped me really develop survival skills. I know how to cook, wash the dishes, do my own laundry, And I remember even with my father, when I first asked him to teach me how to drive a motorcycle, it was not driving that he first taught me. What he did was to make sure that the motorcycle, it was like it has a flat tire.
How to fix a flat tire?
Said if you can fix it, then it's the time I can teach you how to drive. It's like the formation,
Step by step.
Step by step, and really going into the fundamentals.
What about you talked about your parents and your grandparents, but how did your family relate to the parish? Tell us about your faith life. Was that an important part? Do you remember church being a big part of your childhood, or was it just sort of in the background?
I think it's very important because when I first went to school, parang kindergarten, it was in the parish setup. So I go to our parish church for my studies. So for my basic trainings, read, write, and arithmetic, that basic training. And I was very close, but it was not really seen, especially with my grandparents. It was not really visible. Even when I was with my parents, especially my mom, is very religious. It's like daily rosary is part of our daily activity. you should be home at 6 o'clock, otherwise the gate will be locked, so you'll be outside. You have to wait until after dinner, because there's a prayer, dinner. I mean, there's a structured life, even when we were in the province. So, I think prayer was really part of our training. One thing that I can still vividly remember, ayaw na ayaw namin pag both my parents were out. If we were under the care of our grandmother, the mother of my mom, because I think it's the spiritual life is not so much nurtured in the context of the parish setting, because we were in a barrio. So the home, our
home church
was basically parang it's more of influential in terms of nurturing our spiritual life. Even up to, during my elementary years, not really visible. We were churchgoers every Sunday. Then, of course, when I was in high school, I was part of an organization, Children of Mary, COM, in our school, and then the sisters, Franciscan Apostolic Sisters, was also very important component of my, maybe I would relate it already now to the vocation, because I was like a sacristan, I was helping the sisters. So that, I think, part of the whole development of my personal spiritual life. Although priesthood was at the very beginning, it was part of my personal dream.
Even in high school?
In high school, I think it got lost along the way. Siyempre high school life.
Of course, yes. That's for most of us.
Parang ano yun in every tournament ng basketball, in every school, parang yung katuwaan ng mga teenager.
Yeah.
So it lost along the way. But again, when I was fourth year, parang dun ulit, parang bumalik.
So, Father, in what I hear you say is that formation has really been a very important part of your life. Formation, not necessarily in the context of spiritual, but really just as a discipline. From your father teaching you first how to fix a flat tire before learning how to ride. So, in what way do you think that influenced you when you started hearing the call for the vocation, and not necessarily as a priest, but really as a Franciscan friar?
I think much of it I would say is in relation to service. I think much of my training was really with people. I have to deal with our tenants. I have to deal with other people, because like when I was growing, I already do multiple functions. One thing that I would say, part of the training that I have, I was the one tending a small store, while taking care of my younger brother, but at the same time playing Jolens. It's all
Well,
together
that
in
really
one
dates
place.
us, Jordan. I don't know how we
Dates us also, because we know what he's talking about.
I know.
So it's all it's happening all together.
Yeah.
But so I think it's the whole idea of being an other-oriented person started from the very young years of my life.
And Father, this sounds like, if I'm not mistaken, that you grew up in a diocesan parish? Or was it a Franciscan parish already then?
Yeah, it was a Franciscan.
Okay. So you saw the brown robes growing up. It sounds
Yes.
part of your childhood.
Yeah, I would say that becoming a Franciscan was almost 99%, because it was my natural habitat, my natural environment. Our parish administered by the friars, and at that point, a lot of friars would also come to our home, sometimes for meals, because my father was lay minister, and then my mom she served for quite a while as a treasurer of the chapel. So later on in their lives, they're very much involved in the community, especially the parish council or the chapel council. So when I went to high school, it was again with the Franciscan sisters. So kaya sabi ko nga, parang natural habitat.
And by default.
By default, it was. But of course, I would say the most influential factor when I decided to become a Franciscan was really the simplicity of the friars. You really can easily see the contrast on how they live their lives and on how they minister to the people. And I think that really was, that was important in my own personal discernment. This is the life that I know. Di ba kasi yung the usual process would be you want to dream big, no? To become someone. And yet, you have this well-trained, well-educated priests, Franciscan friars, but serving the ordinary, wearing ordinary clothes, even in terms of food, they don't complain. Whatever served, you see some joy. So that's the simplicity attracts me most to becoming a Franciscan. And so personally, that's also where I'm trying my best, because this is where I become more conscious of my vocation. So this is now the prototype of life. Kaya nga ako, I think you have heard me said many times, I can just go and plant kamote. And I believe it will find joy in the simplicity of our life.
It really embodies what St. Francis always says, which is to live simply so that others may simply live. It's,
And it ties very closely, Father, to your background growing up. I mean, I see such close parallels between your choice of the Franciscan life, your upbringing, and then you're in a sense moving to the city, getting an education, going to Chicago for further training, and yet what pulled you back, or what pulls you back, is your yearning for simplicity. We started this chat with you saying you're a provinciano. I mean, in many ways, that's the sum total of what keeps pulling you back, right? And I'm guessing that of the many Franciscan values that you'll be talking about in the course of the Fireside Chat, this one speaks to you, maybe not the most, but certainly powerfully. This whole ecology, environment, JPIC, it just fits so neatly with who you are, it sounds like. Is that a fair characterization about it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think looking at the whole process, when I kind of evolved as a person and in relation to advocacy, especially for justice and peace. At one point in my seminary life, I wanted to give up. Because I thought seminary is a place for it. I felt like there's no challenge. Parang hindi challenging yung lives of the seminary. I used to work like summertime, I really do work in the province. As I mentioned earlier, parang I was the one dealing with some of our tenants, especially in the summertime. I go around, yung Bokobra, I was the one counting, yung padayan, pag-sharing, But one thing that struck me most was the difference between my role back home and when I was exposed to the farmers in Santales. Because that was also the crucial time for my discernment. Kasi back home, I was the one collecting our share.
You were the boss.
Yeah. And in one afternoon, after harvesting, there were about 100 cabans of rice. And then after the sharing, my foster father was just sitting, in the corner. And it's like he's thinking so deep. So sabi ko, Tay, what's happened? Ano yung nangyayari? Bakit malungkot ka? Di ba katatapos ng kanina? Sabi niya, I am thinking already where to get the money to start yung new planting season. Sabi ko, why? All my shares is enough to pay my debts. And I think that's where the justice component. Kasi the seminary also, I'm very grateful that we were trained to be socially aware, no? To be isolated, not to be isolated from the struggles of the people, especially the poor. So from that experience, yung component ng justice and peace, naging mas malinaw sa akin. And of course, the face of God that I want to serve from the very beginning, when I started my seminary life, mas naging klaro. Parang ika nga I can now see the face of God in the person I'm going to serve. So, yung mga farmers, parang sila yung nagano. That is why when I went home, of course, may pagtatalo kami ng tatay. Kasi I'm now coming from different perspectives. Sabi ko, I think there's something wrong in the system. So parang, so that's the starting point in the way I was questioning.
You know, Father, it's really interesting as you talk because it sort of parallels an incident in the life of Saint Francis when he was in the marketplace and he sold all the merchandise of his father, which of course that really displeased his father when he sold all the cloth, and so it just makes me think that there was some kind of parallelism which became the turning point or the defining moment in the call for your vocation.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. But of course, during that time it was like,
of course, you wouldn't know.
I don't even know, and it was only when in retrospect of what happened.
Yes, amazing.
There's one thing also, like for instance, in relation to ecology. So, seminary would really, provide you all the necessary tools, not only to serve by way of feelings, but really by way of social analysis. And we used to have a former shop, and because of my, my seminary training in the ecological consciousness is starting to dawn on me. So I told my siblings, of course, they don't really like the idea. And it was the time when my father already passed away. So economically it will affect us. So I told them, let's close the shop. Because the shop is one instrument to illegal gambling. So maybe a concrete.
Yes.
And I told, of course, then let's try to work hard. Maybe God will provide us in some other ways to find the resources necessary for our survival. Kasi of course, definitely there was still a change of financial and economic condition when our father passed away. There was nothing present. So that I think it's also part of the consciousness. I also have the obligation to pass on what I learned, for instance, as a friar, as a Franciscan, even to my brothers and sisters. Of course, we debate. But again, it's a matter, of course, of bringing the good news back home.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, they will still be my family.
Yes.
The Franciscans may kick me out, but I do believe that my family will never. Will always be there to accept me.
Yes.
So, but it was not a hard decision insofar as the mind, the rational, the reason is concerned. It was easy, but then there are some, practical repercussions. But God cannot be outdone in His generosity. So I do believe He provided us another means in order to survive. And that where also I would say if your lifestyle is simple, you don't really have to ask for more. So it's the maintenance of a lifestyle that becomes your cost.
Father, what I find fascinating about what you just said is that it seems to marry what makes logical sense to even the most secular of persons in today's world. And yet, it is so biblical, right? And St. Francis, in a sense, drew that out, and perhaps Pope Francis saw that and in fact is living that today, something that the Franciscans have been living for the last 800 years. So, for instance, tying in what makes so much sense, common sense, to something more theological is a very powerful statement. So, for instance, I'd like to ask you about this term, exemplarism. It's a big, it's a big $1 word, right? 100 peso word. What does it mean, and how does that tie into what you just talked about, which makes so much sense to almost everybody, it seems to me?
Okay. Please put it more in a complicated way first.
Yeah.
The whole principle of exemplarism is part only of St. Bonaventure's structure or process. And basically, it's also kind of a development from Pseudo-Dionysius, from the Platonic philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, in terms of this cosmic theory of exemplarism, there are actually three different levels or stages. The principle of emanation, meaning where everything comes from. And then the principle of exemplarism, where the creative being expresses, exemplifying the intention of where it came from, the creator, and then the consummation, which means the return. So there's really the cycle.
Right.
From where you came from, there you also would go back. Okay? So the emanation, from my simple understanding, if I still can remember it right in our Franciscan philosophy and theology, simply means the nature of the creator is shared to whatever the creator created. For instance, if I am the maker of this table, it's not only the table, the shape of the table that becomes part of who the table is. The creator extended who he is to what he created. So, from our Franciscan point of view, which is always the good, the bonum, a loving God, so whatever God created shares that goodness. So that the principle of emanation. Yeah, the essence. So, kaya nga, lahat, not only people, not only human beings. Kasi if everything was created by God, and God is good, so God shared the goodness to all the rest of creation. So that's the principle of emanation. And then now, being good, as a created being, the exemplarism, you become not a reflection. That's where the exemplarism principle comes in. We as created, from the beginning, like it was a creation story, we are created in the likeness and goodness of God. So that's our identity. That's who we are. Right. So our mission is to reflect, to express that goodness
Of our Creator.
So when we look at everything, things around us, we should be able to see the goodness. Actually, in Bonaventure's mind, parang ito pa yung self-diffusive, kasi lumalabas talaga siya. Pero parang, if there's, in his process of contemplation, parang sabi niya, we first discern the image of God, the presence of God in the created being. And as we discern on the created images of God, or being of God, we are introduced now into the reality of God, the being God. So the materiality helped us understand the Creator. So, yun yung gano'n. Kaya, parang yung puno, it's not just a puno. An ordinary tree. It has its own role in the entire universe, in the entire economy of yung ecology, di ba? So, yun yung ano. And then of course, siyempre, that introduction with exemplarism and all, how can we see now, parang the challenge for instance, in our present context, how can we see the image of God in the midst of pandemic, in all things, in all creatures. So it's not only animate, but even those inanimate. It's being not only the living things, even the non-living things.
So this concept, this theological concept, really is the root of where the canticle, brother, son, sister, root, is rooted in.
Yeah, Saint Francis kasi was very, he's a charismatic man. So, parang whatever he feels, result of his prayers, he acted upon, of course. Mas simple lang actually Saint Francis. But with the coming of the intellectuals in the order, they somehow kind of synthesize or organize the thoughts of Francis, and of course with the family of Bonaventure, Don Scotus. These are great Franciscan philosophers, Alexander that help us also organize our thoughts. No?
Right.
Kasi in a way talaga, mayroon kami sinasabi yung as Franciscans, for lack of a better term, I would use the term happy-go-lucky. Very spontaneous, di ba? Yung natural lang talaga kami, yung gano'n. So, that's how we get. But of course, you don't see us kasi in the high level of society. We're always kasi sa margins kasi kami.
Yes.
Service.
Yun namin ng buhay.
But Father D, you brought up a good point though. While that may be true, it's also true that Bonaventure, Duns Scotus, these are highly intellectual and learned Christian scholars. And so what fascinates me is you have the Provinciano who grows up, then spends 5 years in Chicago for higher studies. That must have been a clash of, or maybe a study in contrasts, right? I mean, tell us some stories about your time in Chicago. You go from your upbringing, and now all of a sudden you're there for higher studies. And then we're talking about JPIC. What is the intersection of those three events in your life in Chicago?
I would say, essentially, nothing has changed. I mean, insofar as my self-understanding, nothing has changed. I'm still the kid from Samar.
Yeah.
So when I was in Chicago, parang walang pumasok sa utak ko na extra. I was there for studies. So actually, my personal motivation, like as I always do naman, even before my partner studies, I only have one principle in relation to studies. I want to give my best, to do my best, because the people whom I will serve deserve the best. And when I say people with whom I am going to serve deserve the best, it does not mean that only, for instance, Forbes Park should benefit from it. No. The best that I can give in Forbes Park is actually also the best that I have given when I was in the Metagata. So, parang yun yung basic na this is for the people na I'm going to serve. They deserve the best from a minister. So, yun lang. Of course, there's the difference of culture, different of, syempre, katulad dito, nagkikiraman kami ng sasakyan, Miss Right Dad, when I'm going to use the car, to return back home, then bigyan ako ng sarili kong susi ng car, I have my own car, service ko, but there's a difference.
Yeah, the circumstances.
There's a difference, but I think it did not change me. as a person insofar as basic personal values.
But I'm sure it changed the people you were around, right? You were telling us some stories about how you ministered to your friends in a first world country about recycling, about one-use plastic. I mean,
Yeah, it was a challenge really to speak up, especially when you are given financial support. I mean, the brothers in the US were the ones paying for my tuition, for my board and lodging and everything. But then there were some practices in the house na I felt I need to maintain, keep it myself. Concretely, actually, ito is simple lang. It's a very simple thing. Eating extra. Yung mga tawag natin dito sa Pilipinas, yung mga leftover. Yung mga sobra-sobra. So, I kind of practice it to eat them the following day. Of course, they try to talk to maybe teach me na with medical reason is okay. It's not good to eat leftover. Pero my point was, I cannot participate the wastage, the throwaway mentality of the first world, because I know by heart that there are a lot of Filipino people who cannot even have a decent food for a day. So parang sa akin, that was my my sharing. But again, sabi ko, if you can hear me from where I am coming from, there's another solution. So we just prepare food that is enough for us, so we don't have to throw it. Because otherwise, if we throw it away, it's not just for our health reason. It's also a practice that throwing away other people deserve to have. So parang yung ganun lang namin na usapan. But of course, when I voice it out, I'm the only Filipino friar in the community. I was willing naman to pack up my things and go home. But yung basic principle na nagpa-participate ka. Actually, it's very easy. It's very easy to be subsumed by what is the prevailing culture. No? Kasi it's about comfort. With its comfort and security that are at stake, usually, ang dali ng tao makalimot sa ang kanungan. So to me, parang very important na I don't forget where I came from. And even I'm not, hindi ako nahihiya eh. Bahagi ito ng sino ako eh. For me, mas ano pa sa akin yung mamahalin ko talaga ako yung aking pinanggalingan. To make it to make it a guide wherever I am. So, yun yung gano'n na prinsipyo. So, simple mo na yun eh. Simple yun sa throwaway system. Tapos, even in terms of recycling, di ba? Kasi, any amount of comfort, there's always corresponding what would be the term? Parang there's always the element of we contributed to the destruction.
there's a cost to every comfort you get, perhaps.
So,
And you know, Father, it really speaks of maintaining integrity to who you are, integrity to where you came from, and to the awareness of who you are. Because you're right, Father, it's so easy to be assimilated into a context of comfort and security, as you were talking about. So, can you speak a little bit about that? You were talking about service, and you're talking about simplicity, about integrity. In many ways, those are the very things the very issues that we as parishioners and ordinary people we struggle with. So can you speak to us a little bit about that? How can we maintain that in our world today, in the context of our world today?
I think the general principle that we have to apply is, the simple our life will be, the lesser our throwaway or wastages can become. So this is true even to our comforts. So for instance, we really have to do, our even little share. We weren't expecting the man to do major, like world-changing approach, but simply yung basura, yung trash that we have. Kasi if you only have to measure yung personal, for instance, how many trash that I produce, that will already be contributory to the destruction of Mother Earth. No? So parang sa bawat papel na gagamitin, ilang puno yung pinupuputulin. So kasi this is again, I think our participation should be put in the context na everything is interrelated. Everything is interrelated. But everything has also its particular worth. Diba? So may worth din sila. Kaya yun yung parang, if you are not careful in terms of managing our resources, magkakaproblema din tayo. Like for instance, maybe if I will take care of my own garbage, I have a mission to at least pakuntian siya. Less trash na pwede kong gawin. What does it mean? I think it does not simply mean ayokong magkalat. But I would bring it sa discussion level of, I do this because the next generation deserve a better place. So it's actually an expression of what we call the intergenerational responsibility. When we came into this earth, it was good, it was beautiful. But then the question sometimes is, it slowly deteriorates because the people who live and pass through this world slowly destroy it. It should have been the other way around. No? The people in this world, coming to live and enjoy this world, should have made this world a better place. And that's where our co-creatorship of God comes in. We participate in the ongoing creation of our world. Kaso baliktad eh. So, but I think it's a challenge na we really have individually and collectively how to work. No? At saka, there are also principle of yung sinasabi natin custodialship, diba? Depending on where we are in our life and what we do, we all have our peculiar contribution.
Right.
Parang doon din papasok yung collective dimension nito. O ikaw na namamalengke, pwede ba huwag ka na mag-uwi ng plastic sa bahay? Okay? Kasi kayo namamalengke, para wala na tayong basura. O ikaw na naman dyan na nasa bahay, na naglilinis, you also do your share. Parang, I think, yung contribution, I would say, of the Franciscan spirituality here, we find joy in doing something even little. Yung portion ko lang. Yung concept ng portion ko lang, it's a little portion. So, I think each person, if all of us in the world will think one little thing that I can contribute for the protection, preservation of the entire creation, I think it will make a difference. Hindi naman natin kinakailangan na Excuse me.
Change the
You
word.
know, if you really think about it, this is our home, and this planet is our only home, and if we can take care of it, and in a very concrete way, like you were saying, if you go to the market and then just tell yourself, bring a recyclable bag, why bring home the plastic? Or if I'm going to drink water, why should I drink a water with a plastic bottle that I will
Yeah.
throw away? One-use plastic bottles. You know, Father Rayu has this huge water bottle next to him, and it's full of special water, right, Father?
To boost my immune system.
Yeah.
So,
And Father, what I find fascinating about this is that, and perhaps Pope Francis is a big player in all of this, is it seems to me that this approach depoliticizes many of these issues, because not only does it make sense to a secular person, but it reminds us that it is biblical, and it says to everybody, both the secular and the religious, or the Christians and anybody who professes themselves to be Christians, that it's the same thing. We believe in the same things, and Saint Francis of Assisi had been practiced this 800 years ago. And what seems to be fashionable today about saving the planet and climate change is all great. And it's no different than what the Franciscans have been practicing all these times. And that's what, for me, that's very encouraging, because it seems like one area of agreement that we can finally gather around and really put our weight behind.
mm, yeah, I like the recent document, the Laudato Si.
Yes, Laudato Si.
Basically, I would say, when it comes to ecology, it goes beyond religious affiliation, political ideology, economic system, because we only have one home, and this is the only one we have. So the air we breathe, the water we drink, they're not identified as Christian or Catholic or whatever.
Correct.
Divine. All of God's creation is in support of life. And so my take of the document Laudato Si, it's not limited to caring for the environment. To me, it contains basically some fundamental principles in life that we have to observe, in relationship that we have to maintain. So that whether you are in business, you are in a religious sector, that life-giving relationship is always present. So this really is basically a lifestyle, a call for a lifestyle. Of course, there are some certain elements in terms of how it will be for our economic system, in terms of how to take care of our ecology. But I would say in general, it should be taken really as a way of life. Principles that will guide us in living our daily life. So it's not something, we should also go beyond the document. How the challenge for me is how to translate the document into our daily life.
Correct.
Daily practice.
Correct.
Kasi that will really make the difference. That's where I would say that the challenge for all. I think general naman din yan sa atin na, for instance, as a Roman Catholic, we don't think naman, even in terms of our pronouncements, or in terms of encyclicals or whatever documents. It's not only for ourselves. It's really for the entire humanity. Of course, we're urged to practice it first. But then, it's always directed toward what will be for the common good. It's the common good that's the goal. Kaya yung issue ng yung some of our friars, no, na they are involved in terms of apprehending laggers. Sasabihin ko, Father, pag-misa na lang kayo, huwag na lang sumama para dakpin itong mga laggers. You know, it's part of expression. Kasi walang gumagawa eh.
Yeah.
I would say if somebody is doing it, for instance, agencies that are supposed to protect our environment, if they're doing their job, I don't think we will be participating.
Right.
So, yun ano lang na, I think the practical side, the practice of it, is very important when we talk about ecology. Because it's balancing, you mentioned earlier, Len, about oikos, home, we really have to see these are home. But I think the most challenging part here is, pwede tayong mawala, mabubuhay ang kalikasan. But the moment kalikasan ang nawala, sasama tayo. We will be part of that. When they disappear, we will go with them. But when us disappear, they will survive. Actually, we are the reason why they are disappearing.
Exactly.
You know, thank you, Father, for putting it really in very practical and simple terms so that we can understand. Because you're right. Nature will survive without us, but we will not. And like you were saying, if each of us can do our small part and contribute that small part to the preservation of our home and for the greater good, for the common good, that's how we can live Franciscan values in this day and age. That's it's very interesting, don't you think?
Yeah, Father, as we bring this to a close, can you reduce it to the practical for our viewers? Perhaps, are there 3 practical suggestions you can give to our viewers that they can do, short of apprehending illegal loggers, that they can apply in their daily lives? That if everybody were to raise their hands and say, I'm going to do this starting tomorrow, that
Recycle.
recycle. What can I mean, as an observer, you've been watching this unfold. Can you think of maybe 3 suggestions you can give to not just parishioners, but just everybody who's viewing this that you think will make a difference in their own small way?
Okay. The first thing I would suggest is to examine our own way of life.
Okay.
And by examining our way of life, we have to ask this basic question. In what way I participate the wanton destruction of Mother Earth, of our common home. So I think we have to look at it, because by identifying where we participated in the destruction, we'll be able to find solutions. Okay? So, and then once you're able to find where you participated, where I participated, then I can slowly work on the personal level, and maybe convince other. No? So, kanina isa ka lang, dalawa na kayo. So, yun yung gano'n. And then let's go with a more positive side. What it is that I want to contribute? Like, even in our daily activities, what it is that I want to contribute in terms of preserving yung kalikasan. Kasi our preservation of Mother Earth, basically from a Franciscan perspective, pag tiningnan mo kasi dito, sino mapiktado? It will really bring us down to the poor.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yung magiging direction natin eh. So ngayon, yung ating action is now on the level of solidarity. Kaya ko ito ginagawa eh. Kasi gusto kong magkatugon. But the expression of solidarity might also come in different ways. No? Managing our use of electricity, planting trees, no? Possible.
Or plastic bags, Father.
Plastic bags. No? May marami, may mga maliliit na pwede natin gawin. And then the third one, I will say, kasi binanggit ko na yung examination, how we contributed. And then the second one is really bringing into action. No? Ano yung conflict na pwede natin i-contribute. The third one, I think, is not only to work on the personal level. Now I would say, we also have to kind of bring our advocacy into a more communitarian advocacy. So let's bring it in a level of community. Paano, how are we going to work hand in hand? Kasi this one, I would now to connect this in relation to, for instance, concretely, the community should be the catalyst, no? The agent for the greater community. Kasi we cannot just do this on a personal level lang eh. Yes, we have the personal level, but we also have to bring it to the level of the community. Kaya halimbawa, like for instance here in Santuario, in what way we can help contribute the preservation. Yun yung tanong din dito. So, as much as possible, we don't cut trees na sa palibot natin. As much as possible, we really prevent using styrofoam. Kaya nga, when I started here, I already introduced na for our almusal, no, sa Quezon San Antonio. Yung maghugas tayo din. I think for the last 6 years, naghuhugas lang tayo, and then we recycle. So, yun yung sa level ng community na, kasi importante yung the participation.
Great, very nice. Very nice.
Thank you, Father. That was very good advice that, all of us as ordinary people, lay people, can really follow. I think one of the first steps, like what you were saying, was really self-awareness, do things on a personal level, and then take it one step further for the good of the community. So on that note, Dennis?
On that note, we come to a close for this segment of Fireside Chats. Thank you, Father Ray Galoy, for joining us. It was a real blessing. And good day to all of you.
Thank you, Father Rayu, Len, and Dennis. That was a very extensive yet interesting discussion on justice, peace, and the integrity of creation. What I thought would have been a simple story on caring for the environment evolved into a fascinating discussion on our common home. We saw a modern-day Saint Francis in Father Rayu. Saint Francis, in order to raise money, sold all of the cloth of his father to rebuild his church. Father Rayu decided to close their furniture business as he saw it as indirectly supporting illegal logging, even if this meant having to bear its financial effects. He was firm in his convictions and trusted in God's generosity. At this point, we would like to again turn to you, our viewers. What have you taken away from this session? Aside from what you are already doing to preserve the environment, in what ways have you responded to the outsized impact of the pandemic on the poor? Please take a few moments to write down this question and reflect on the answer. Next week, we will start our session with a sharer and also get to know our next friar. Thank you for joining us in today's Friarside Chats. See you in next week's episode entitled, I've Got Your Back, where we will talk about the Franciscan charism of fraternity.
My peace, where there is hatred, let me so love. Where there is injury, let me so pardon. Where there is doubt, let there be faith. Where there's despair, let me so hope. Where there is darkness, let there be light. Where there is sadness, joy. Oh, divine Master, grant that I may never seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand.